Welcome to the Sobersih Uprising. My name is Holly Crevo, a former heavy drinker who started a Sobersih Uprising of her own over 2 years ago, and everything in her life has changed. On the Sobersih Uprising, we tell stories of finding freedom from alcohol on our own terms, making it our best power move. And speaking of power moves, I am so excited to have Tori with me today. She is the founder of Compete Confidence Golf, whose mission is to create better resources for welcoming community for women of all skills in golf. She does this through programs, courses, and amazing retreats. I think it's Girls Gone Golfing that provide phenomenal experiences for women to experience the game of golf. So welcome, Tori.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so I love what you're doing. I know you play tennis. I'm an avid tennis player, and I'm always like, we need this for tennis. We need these amazing events for adult tennis players.
Absolutely. That and pickleball. Oh my God, there's so many opportunities out there.
All the things. Well, and I'm not a golfer, but as you know, my wife Katie's been to several of your events, and I've been following. And I know that you also talk about your sobriety, and so I wanted to talk, hear your story, how it's impacted the work you're doing in the world, and kind of just get a little more to know you.
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome.
Let's dive in.
Yeah, let's do it. So tell me, I believe you've been sober over 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
I used to call them sober stories, but now I'm calling them like sober sagas because they always seem to have a little bit of drama when they get there. So how did you come to sobriety?
Yeah. So, I started drinking pretty young and it escalated very fast. And so throughout high school, did all the things, misbehaved plenty. I had to, going to college was still very important to my family and just to having that persona of going to college. So I actually had to pretty much like bottom of the barrel, had to go to a place down in Florida and basically just pay my way in. I didn't have the grades or the resume by any means to get into a decent college. And I managed to screw that up within, the first semester. So my parents came to me and they basically gave me an ultimatum saying, you either come home back to Rochester, New York, or go live with your sister out in California. At the time, she just had a newborn and she needed help. And so I chose to go out to California. And here's the thing. When I started living with my sister, she didn't grow up drinking. She didn't grow up in a party environment because, she was a professional athlete and that just was not normal to her environment whatsoever. So her and her husband quickly, put boundaries up and said, this is not okay. Like this behavior is not okay. Because of course, it just transferred over to California. I can't, it's not like as the flight going to California, everything disappeared. No, the same behaviors just kept coming. And so it was very quick for them to see there was a problem and that they weren't okay with it. And one morning after a bender of, crawling back to the house in the middle of the night, my brother-in-law said, this is enough, and actually took me directly to a psych ward in Northern California. And they quickly realized that wasn't the place for me. It was more, I needed to go to a rehab facility. So we drove to Oakland and I went to a rehab facility, and I've been sober ever since. And it's crazy because, again, I was the youngest one there. I was 19 years old at the time. And you think to yourself, when you're that young, like, really, is this what's going to be the rest of my life? Yeah. And how am I going to have a good time? And how am I going to socialize? And how can this possibly last forever? When you're that young. And I just remember doing what they actually told me to do at the time. So I went in, after I was done with rehab, I went into a halfway house. I did 90 and 90. And then because I was doing the things that they were telling me to do, which is actually the miracle in itself at the time that I was actually following through with those things, I was able to go longer, stay sober longer, meet people, learn how to have a good time without drinking, and again, taking it literally one day at a time, and you just keep stacking those together. And here I am.
That's incredible. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Well, and like you said, at 19, you're like, man, if I live for like 70 more years, that's a lot of sober days, and how overwhelming that can feel. Right. And I love you said like the miracle was doing the work.
Yes.
Right. So like looking back, what do you know, because at 19, I could see that's really easy to be like, it's not that bad, or I'll figure it out, like what, besides doing the work, what was there a mental edge you had that you think really helped you with that?
I now as an adult and seeing how I work, in a work environment and how my personality is, I do tend to finish projects. If I start something, I finish it. And so maybe that is the mindset that has helped me. I don't know, but it's just, yeah, I can't really put a pin on that one.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that was great. I'm curious, like, what do you think, because now you're doing these amazing, and I want to get into kind of the community you've built and how important community is just in all areas. What do you think the 19-year-old version of you would say to you now? Like, what would if she saw who you are now, what would she say?
Oh gosh. First of all, none of this would be possible if I wasn't sober. You know what I mean? Like family, kids, job, everything that's gone on with the work. Like none of it's possible if I wasn't sober.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if 19-year-old me saw me 21 years sober doing what I'm doing now, she would be like, holy shit. Like she wouldn't even believe it, It's just such a, again, I always go back to how do you have fun? How do you socialize without drinking? Because that was my entire life, was it back in the day. Like I couldn't do any of the things I was doing without drinking or doing drugs. So that to me was the biggest hurdle. So again, that 19-year-old me is thinking, how did you do all that without using something?
How do you have a joyful, fun life if you're not drinking at that point?
How boring.
Yeah. Well, I love you said it too, because fun and socializing at 19 is a big piece, because you don't have the responsibilities typically, but that's no different than 40, 50, 60-year-olds, right? Like it's part of our fun. It's part of our socialization. Exactly. And I know, talking about you, I've, heard you on a podcast and talk about this. You had a sober softball league. I think you started it after. Tell me how incremental that was, or excuse me, how impactful that was for you.
Gosh, I want to first say that might be one of the proudest things that might be one of the things I'm most proud of. Because again, I joined a sober softball league in California. I was probably 6 months sober at the time. And I grew up playing softball, and I was like, oh, okay, this seems fun. And I signed up on the little tally sheet, at the Alano Club, and it's actually where I eventually met my husband. And it just, again, because that sober softball league was around, I think it helped me stay sober even during those tough beginning days. And it just helped me so much. And I had so much fun, and I was able to compete. And the league in itself in Northern California was so well run, and it was so substantial. And I remember there's a big tournament at the end of the season, and we would travel all around Northern California playing. And it was just like, wow, this is incredible. And shortly, I believe we played in it for a little over a year, and we eventually moved to Phoenix. And Phoenix, it's beautiful year round. So I was like, there's got to be a sober softball league here. And I moved here thinking, okay, I'm going to sign up for the sober softball league right away. And there wasn't one. I was like, how the hell can that be? That doesn't make any sense. So after I kind of established myself at the local Alano clubs and got my home group and got a sponsor and kind of felt my way through the valley as far as, the AA community here in the valley, I said, I'm going to start it. And I literally made a flyer, printed it out, and the flyer said, meet at this Valley Alano Club at, I don't remember exactly, but at 6 p.m. on Tuesday. Okay. And I went to all the Alano clubs throughout the valley, because there's so many, and I posted that flyer on every board of their non-AA announcements. And God willing, at that meeting, 8 coaches came. Like 8 people showed up that said, okay, I want to form a team and be a part of this league. And you kind of need at least 8. 8's a good number. And so 8 coaches showed up, and those coaches, we had a meeting on how this was going to go, and I took care of like reserving the fields and how it would all work. But these 8 people, these 8 coaches needed to form their own team. Like they were in charge of going to find enough sober alcoholics that wanted to play softball. And, there was a requirement that you had to be at least 30 days sober to play, to give people incentive to stay sober. And they were able to form their teams, and the league started with those 8 teams. We played at Pierce, I think it was called Pierce Park down at 52nd Street and Thomas, like around there, 52nd Street and Thomas. And we showed up every Sunday, and it was an event. Like it very much feels like my golf events now. Like all 8 teams came and played at the same time, kind of like, and I would have a barbecue. Like I would buy all this food from Costco, and we would have a barbecue, and you were encouraged to bring your own dish to contribute to the barbecue. So we were playing softball, we were eating. It was like such a nice community, and that league is still going strong. I mean, it has grown. I released it after probably 3 years of running it, because we eventually moved back to New York. But I gave it to someone else to take over, and still to this day, it's going on. So
that's incredible. And I love, that 7-day, like those 7 days between those times gave people hope, gave them something to look forward to. Exactly. Right. And then to see 80 other people that are just like you, like the power, what that can do to people's confidence and hope.
Yeah. Because again, you'd have, if you love softball, like a lot of people do, you want to stay sober to get to that next game. Like it gave you an extra motivation. I heard from so many players, past and present, that said, my motivation for a certain period of time was just to stay sober so I could go play sober softball. And, sometimes you just need those things to get through those really dark days, and that's exactly what it served me in my early sobriety too. It was like, I was having so much fun playing softball, but there was that requirement, like you had to be sober for 30 days. So I didn't want to screw that up, because I was having so much fun on the field. And it's very special to me, and I don't play in it anymore, but it still holds a really dear spot in my heart.
Well, and like the legacy that lives on past you not playing anymore, right? They're still out there. And exactly. I love you said that of like, how do you define having fun? How do you define community? And you just went out and created what it was for you when it wasn't there.
And I share that too, because you see in the women's golf community, because that's really where I'm immersed now, you'll see women that ask, like, is there any leagues that are after work, or are there any leagues on the weekend that I can join? And I always encourage them, like, if you can't find one, start one. Like, just start it. Someone's got to start everything, right? Like everything starts somewhere. And if you can just gather together 4 women, like one foursome, and tell those women to share it with other, like it will grow. It will, but someone's got to start it. So if you're looking for something that's ideal for you, trust me, it will be ideal for other players too, but someone's got to step up and get it going.
It's like we look around, we're like, somebody should start it. And you look around and you're like, oh shit, I think that's me.
Like
it's gotta be somebody.
It's a lot of work, but it's something you can be very proud of.
Well, and I believe you started your company in 2019. Is that around that time? Which
2018, I think it was.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, I would love to hear, do you think part of that sober softball and that community did that plant the seed for you to do something similar for women in golf?
Yeah. I mean, I look back at it now and they're so similar. And when I started my business, it was very much just fitness, and it slowly went to golf. But it was the fitness that made me start something of my own. So I have 3 kids. They're grown now. So they're 14, 16, 17. But getting into the fitness industry made me kind of build the business on my own. My kids were pretty much taken care of at this point, and, it started to morph into the golf community. So, but yeah, there's tons of similarities between that.
Well, and I know that, you can be a scratch golfer, you can have a handicap in the 20, I don't even know, what did they go to, 30, some,
36,
36
is the max that we play to.
All are welcome. It's, I've heard the stories, I've seen the things, like, so how important is inclusivity for you in your business?
It's really important, because here's one of the best things about golf is the handicap system. Like, we can play and compete against all different levels and have it be a fair game. And on the other side, it's very important to me to celebrate the low handicap golfers and the gross side of it. So you can win gross and net at all my events, because it's important to celebrate both of them.
Yeah.
But again, one of the greatest things about golf is that there's no excuse. We can play with all different levels, use the handicap system, and still have an amazing time. And at the end of the event, celebrate the winners. Yeah. And so why would I have an event that's just for super low handicap indexes, or just an event for just beginners? Yeah. Like, that doesn't make any sense. So I actually encourage, even if you are on the beginner side, I have had so many players that have played in our tournaments that are like, this was my first tournament. I made the leap. And I'm so glad that they do that, because playing in tournaments and competing is so important, that if I can give a vessel to have that be your first tournament and have it be a safe place and have them see that you can compete with all different levels and have a great time, and also teach them what a tournament is all about and give them that spot to kind of start that journey, I'm all for it.
That's incredible, because it is intimidating. I remember, like, the first big tennis tournament I played in, you're like, where do I go? There's that. And so for you to have this safe place where they're not like, I can ask the questions that feel dumb or whatever, and like get that security and safety to go do other things.
Well, and also realize too, like, you actually don't need to know every rule in the rules book in order to play. Like, I don't know all the rules by any means, not even close. Like, it's also probably it's always less intimidating than you think it's going to be, with all things, really, like at the end of speaking in public, or going on a vacation by yourself, or everything, like, it's always less intimidating than your mind tells you it's going to be at the end,
Our mind makes it a whole thing, and you're like, this isn't a whole thing. And I'm curious, like, being, I think it's changing, but golf is typically, more thought of as like a male dominated sport. It's definitely a sport that you would equivalent, cart girls, booze, beer at the turn, all that, so what has that been like for you to kind of start shifting those perceptions of golf?
Yeah. I mean, and you still go out today. I mean, I go to the range very frequently, and it's mostly all men, but it is changing. There is a significant more amount of women out there. I think, again, it is just showing up and showing other women that we're out here. The best thing we can do is be out there, and so that the person that's just scared to go out there on her own can see, okay, there's more and more women out there. Yeah. And, the best thing we can do is just keep showing up.
Yeah, absolutely. And, talking about, do you see a trend towards less alcohol consumption on the golf course, or what's kind of because I know you're out there a lot. What are you seeing?
That's a great question. I have no idea.
Oh, that's okay. That's interesting.
I'm all for, everyone having a good time, whatever that looks like for them. Gosh, I would probably, since the game is growing at the pace that it is, I would think that there's more booze being consumed than ever.
Right.
And I mean, that's just golf, but as someone that is, again, immersed in this game, there is plenty of times rounds and opportunities where there's rarely any drinking. So it's not every time you go out in the golf course, you're going to see people, or it's not every time you go out in the golf course, you're going to be with people that are drinking. That's not the case whatsoever. But I mean, it is a reality that people, every time they golf, they have a drink, it's just all what the golf is for them,
Absolutely. Well, you're being sober, 21 years. Like, do you have triggering moments with your wanting to drink? Or are there moments that you're like,
honestly, not with drinking. I do get jealous of people. Jealous seems like a silly word, but people that are can take gummies. So I don't sleep that well. So there is a big part of me that would love to be able to take a gummy to help me sleep. But I know that that's just going to turn into other things, like I will start abusing that, so it's just not possible for me to use that. And I was microdosing has become a really big thing, and microdosing on the golf course actually has become a bigger thing. And I asked my husband, who's also sober, I go, do you think microdosing would mess with your sobriety? And he's like, that's a good question. I don't know, but it's probably not a good idea. It's just, we all know, like, we have those addictive personalities, and it just will always turn into something. So as far as getting triggered by alcohol, no, never really anymore. It's more just, that pot looks nice.
It'd be nice to have a weed brownie. I mean,
exactly.
Well, you lived through what like alcohol can do to you, right? You're like, I don't want to go back to that. You're like, but I don't know, that looks nice. You see the glamorous side of microdosing.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So it's a thing on the golf course, like doing it before rounds?
Well, pot, I don't know if that's as much. I'm more just like when I see women doing it at parties or my friends doing it just for fun, like that looks more fun to me and more like that would be a good time than drinking, because I also know how horrible I feel in the morning after drinking. Like some of these ladies, man, they are warriors. I have to say, when I started doing these events, the dudes would always say to me, okay, you have to prepare for the players that have partied too much the night before and that don't show up the morning after to play.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, guess what? I have never had that situation. Okay. Everyone, all the women show up the next morning. And I think to myself, how the hell did they do that? I have these women, they're total warriors. Like it just doesn't, they show up.
That's incredible. That's funny. You're like, I don't have to worry about my women. They will party all night and they will show up and golf.
And because that's how much they love golf. Like that golf is as important to them as probably more important to them than the partying, so.
Well, it was like the community the night before. I mean, you've done such a phenomenal job at creating such a great community for these women that they may have never experienced in their whole life.
Yeah.
It's like,
it's a really good time. And you don't know, like we really try and cultivate these experiences and you don't know what it's like till you really experience it and see the energy. The energy is always just amazing. And that's my main goal.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, would you ever do a sober golf event?
Probably, I won't say never, but it's never, I do think that there is a need for it. Like, I think that there would be plenty of people that would sign up. I think to really pull it off, I would probably start a league first, and it wouldn't really be exclusive to women. It would probably be more of a co-ed thing, just to like get it going and see how many women actually want to show up and do it. And then if the want was there, then I would probably branch off into a women's league.
Yeah.
But
no, that makes total sense. Well, when you think of maybe somebody listening who's questioning their relationship with alcohol, or kind of like, maybe I'm drinking too much, or maybe I am definitely drinking too much. What's maybe one or two words of advice you would give somebody?
Well, my first thought is, if you're thinking about it, if you're thinking that you're drinking too much, it probably is a problem. It probably is something that you're a little too dependent on. And, I'd say, hey, you want to go to a meeting together just to kind of see what it's about. I'm always available to go to a meeting if someone asks, and, just to hear the stories, hear what other people are saying, and see if you can relate to any of it. Let's start there.
Well, I think I love you share that, because there's such power in seeing like I'm not alone, or there's people just, because I think we other people, right? We're like, oh, my drinking's not as bad as them, or it's this. And you're like, oh, wow, Tori and I are doing the same stuff. And like, we both are viewing it as a problem. So I think there's such power, which is what you're kind of doing in golf as well. Different, seeing people like you that want to do those things.
Yeah, it again, like I said in the beginning, we have to show other women that we are out there, and the only way to do it is to show up and be out there.
Yeah,
absolutely. Be out there on Saturday morning when it's usually all dudes. Like, be out there playing in the tournament, and sharing your experience with others.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, are you pretty involved in AA still?
I'm not.
You're not. Okay.
In all honesty, I'm not. I might go to a handful of meetings a year. The frequency of meetings stopped, around 15 years sober. But I know it's there. Yeah. And there are plenty of rooms in the Valley that I can walk in and see plenty of people that I know and feel at home. I always feel comfortable at meetings. And I also know when I'm having a tough time in life, like that, it's, regardless of if I have temptations to drink or use, just difficulties in life in general, like AA is always there and available to me. And it's it's obviously the most amazing community out there. And, for those of you, well, I don't know if a lot of people would be listening to this podcast that aren't in the community or know of the community already, but like in the Valley, for instance, I mean, there are hundreds of thousands or thousands of meetings out there. There's so many different options out there to go and be in the rooms. So we're lucky.
That's incredible. 2 more questions, and then I know you have things to do for your day. How, you talked about, you don't maybe not have those temptations to drink, but I mean, life happens, right? Like I always say, like, sober doesn't solve all your problems, right? Like there's still shit that comes up. Oh, yeah. What are your go-to things in your life to keep you physically, mentally, spiritually, like aligned? Like, do you have any go-tos that you use?
I am someone of, how do I explain this? I like routine. So, and I like a very clean, organized environment. So usually when I feel a little out of control, when things are not feeling good, I have multiple days in a row where I'm just feeling down, I will get back into a routine, organize something, that's usually my go-tos where I can feel more centered, more grounded. If I can do those things, come back to the family, like all the outside noise is affecting me way too much. Let's just focus on the family right now. Let's bring it back in, that helps. But again, it's the further I get away from routine, for me personally, the further I get away from, like, the more disorganized my house, my car, my life feels, the more I'm going to be like tense, So usually those things, getting back in routine, getting a little more organized, will help me feel more centered and grounded, for sure.
Thank you for sharing that, because I think that's somebody, if you've been sober 30 years, if you're contemplating it, if you're off and on, like that's something I think that we can all relate to, is that routine and that, like, your inner people and peace.
Yeah, because trust me, I can isolate like the best of them. I am an introvert, but it can go against me sometimes. Like if I stay by myself for too long, not good things. I start to get down on myself. So again, bringing back the routine of like getting out, going to practice, scheduling another golf round, or, doing things like that, going to record a podcast, just getting out and having that routine will help me kind of get more centered.
Absolutely. Thank you. And, my last question is, you're kind of newer to me in the the concept, but what is soberish? When you think of soberish, what does that mean to you?
It just means to me giving yourself the best opportunity to have the life that you want. Like I said in the beginning of the episode, like none of this is possible without me being sober. Yeah. So however soberish means to you, like I need to be sober in order to be the best possible person, the best possible leader, the best possible mother that I can be. So being soberish would be giving myself the best opportunity at this beautiful life.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. That's wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me, Tori. I will put how to get a hold of you for all the great work you do. Like every time Katie comes back, I'm like, I don't know, maybe I should pick up golf. This could be fun. So maybe you'll see me one day at one of your events. I know you guys have.
I'd love it. I'd love it.
Thank
you so much for having me on, Holly.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for tuning in. Please leave a review, share with somebody who's sober curious, and remember, everything you want is on the other side of saying no to that drink.